We now welcome David Swanson, Executive Director of World Beyond War and Campaign Coordinator for Roots Action, to go deeper on the analysis of the current world stage and how it can develop in the future. Hello, David. Welcome. David, can you hear me?
I hear you. I'm very sorry. Thank you. Good to be here.
It's a pleasure for us to have you with us. David, let's go very quickly to the first question. The NATO summit concluded with more promises of military aid to Kiev. The French said they will supply long-range missiles. Other members referred to the supply of F-16 fighter jets. So it seems that NATO is less focused in finding a solution out of the conflict, but instead continue fueling it with the delivery of these military aid packages. How is world stability affected by NATO's eastward expansion and warmongering policies?
Well, it is further destabilized, and they are quite open about intending the war to continue at length. This is the message of concluding that Ukraine can become a member of NATO after the war ends, because not only, as many people have observed, would that be likely to restart the war, but it's very unlikely that the war can end without a commitment from Ukraine not to join NATO. So this is a recipe for endless war, unless the end is nuclear. And of course, the ideal solution is to get back to the negotiating table. And ultimately, the ideal solution is to stop excluding Ukraine from NATO, but to abolish NATO, which is a destabilizing force in the world, adding Finland and Sweden, adding countless weapon sales, adding aggression in the Arctic after fossil fuels, adding the border of Finland and Russia, and the Baltic becoming a place where you can't put a pipeline without it being blown up. This is going to put pressure on places like Austria and Ireland and Switzerland and end the very idea of neutrality. So this was not a helpful meeting for the world.
Last week, David, the U.S. announced the delivery of cluster munition to Ukrainian forces, something that even some NATO members have not agreed with. As we know, these type of munitions are highly harmful, especially for the civilian population. For its part, the Russian military has warned they would respond if these munitions are used. There are reports that they have already been used, these type of munitions, near the Zaporizhzhia region. So the question is, how do you analyze the role the U.S. is playing in this context and its own geopolitical interest behind the decision to continue fueling the conflict?
Well, several months ago, the U.S. government was talking about cluster bombs as war crimes because it was accusing Russia of using them, as Russia apparently was. Ukraine has been using them as well. The United States has used them in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere, and it's now sending them, and it's compelling its allies, its sidekicks, its NATO members to accept that. Europe is accepting cluster bombs despite the treaty that many European nations have joined, and Europe may be accepting Turkey into the European Union despite any concerns over Turkey's behavior as part of this deal. That remains to be seen. But the fighter jets, the cluster bombs, the fighter jets were described as World War III by President Joe Biden months ago, and now they're sending them in. And the excuse is always, well, Russia is doing it. And the excuse by Russia in putting nukes in another country, Belarus, etc., is always the US is doing it. Well, this is a recipe for endless escalation until somebody uses nuclear weapons.
You're right, David, and in this context that NATO continues to expand and is a destabilizing force in the world, there is another group that is emerging that could maybe act as a counterweight. They will surely have a summit in South Africa, and we're talking about BRICS. So in your opinion, what do you believe will be the reach of BRICS that can act as a counterweight to NATO's military expansionisms and the conflicts in the world to reach a new multipolar world?
Well, what I think is most encouraging is the support for peace and disarmament and global cooperation and the rule of law that is coming from some BRICS members. I don't think a balance of hostile forces is going to save us. We need global cooperation. We are in the hottest days this planet has seen, guaranteed to get hotter, and we can't be focusing on balances of powers between hostile military forces. And BRICS cannot be a force for global rule of law when Russia is a member and alongside the United States, one of the biggest opponents of the global rule of law. The United States is, of course, courting India, which makes a problem for BRICS as well. What I would love to see BRICS do would be to support bringing the world together, despite the behavior of rogue nations like the United States and Russia, in support of equal law for all and cooperation on crises that we have no choice about.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson, so much for your inputs and for your time here today with us.
Thank you.
Well, we were talking with David Swanson, Executive Director of World Beyond War, analyzing the current state of world stability and the future outlook of the international arena.